Well, good morning, and welcome to the Church Online Communications Comprehensive. My name is Peter Frank, and I will be leading this new training series that we are doing. Like I said, it's called a comprehensive. That's a little bit different than what you may have heard before. We'll talk about that in just a second, but I'm very happy to have you join me. This is the first time that we've hosted anything like this where it's a long format training session using Facebook Live. So I appreciate you guys being here and working through any of the kinks if there are any as we go. So I've got everything set up to be streaming live right now. I'm going to switch over to my title slide, and I'll jump back on the camera every now and then. So again, this is the Church Online Communications Comprehensive, and I am Peter Frank. I am the Senior Marketing Manager at Concordia Publishing House. I work with our Church Supplies group. My contact information is on the screen there, and let me make sure that I'm transitioning to the right. There we go. Again, working out the kinks as we go. So there's my contact information. You can see my email address. That's usually the best way to get a hold of me. My phone number is there as well. You can call my office. I'm often not here, but I'm usually in meetings or other things. But do reach out to me. Let's talk about what a comprehensive is. So we're titling this the Church Online Communications Comprehensive because it's a 14-week online training course covering a topic in great detail. So, and it's completely free. I didn't mention that, but I hope you know. This is a subject that I'm very passionate about. It's something that I have done as kind of a one-off presentation in the past. And I can go in much greater detail than I have. And I found that I was always running over, and I got such a great response from the attendees there. I was at the different best practices conferences. I know some of you who attended that are joining us today. And I want to go into this in much greater detail because I feel it's so important for the church to understand how to communicate in today's digital society, because the communication methods have certainly changed. And it's hard to keep up with these changes. And there's a great way to leverage that. So that's what we're doing here today. So again, it's a free 14-week online training course. What's included in that is a little bit different than many training courses. We are going to have the live presentations, but we're going to have a weekly blog post on the Concordia Technology Solutions blog, Technology in Your Ministry. And you may have already seen the one today. If not, I'll have a link later on for you to go and watch that. We'll have a weekly download. And this will be tied in with the lesson. And so it won't be super lengthy. Often there'll be like worksheets or cheat sheets, and that'll be just a helpful takeaway that you can use in your congregation. There will usually be some kind of effort that you would put into that as well, and you'll get a lot out of it. But there'll be the weekly download. There's the weekly live video like you're on right now. Now we will be recording this and putting it on our YouTube channel. We're going to have a separate section where you can go and view all the different resources. So that'll be on there. So if you're joining us after the fact, welcome. Thank you for participating even though you can't participate live. The great part of the live video is that we'll be able to engage in questions. And actually, as I mentioned that, I should probably make sure I'm not seeing now where the questions are. So we'll figure that out as we go. The last thing about the live video is that there's a private Facebook group. And I want to make sure, actually, I think I'm still on the screen here. I'm using a software called OBS, Open Broadcast Studio, and I think I'm getting the two screens confused in terms of what is actually live. So we'll have a private Facebook group. Many of you have already joined that group. We've got several, I think up to 200 people or close to that who are already in there now. There we go. So I think everything's working on the video side. Again, pardon me as I'm still learning through this whole live presentation thing. So that's what's included in the comprehensive. And there will be some other things as we go. I'm going to be sharing some of my thoughts on LinkedIn, and that'll be more from a personal viewpoint or a business viewpoint in terms of how we're doing this, what I'm learning, talking about how to do a live presentation. And I hope that'll be valuable to you in the church as well as we go. So the live training sessions will be every Thursday at 11:30 a.m. Central Time, and that'll go from today, June 1st, all the way through the end of August. And you can always get that at the Concordia Technology Facebook page. So please be sure to tune in. You can get reminders. I'll be going over the full schedule at the end today, and then I'll create these events so that you can get those reminders. But let's get into the real meat of the matter today. So session 1 is titled Planning Church Online Communications. How do we manage all of our communication? And this is going to be an overview session, so we're going to cover a lot here. I may go through it rather quickly, but just know that over the next 13 weeks after this, I'm going to dig into these topics in greater detail. And so if something piques your interest, you'll know exactly which dates you have to be there for the live sessions. So let's get into it. So first off, why are we talking about this? Well, things have changed in today's world. People have busier lives, and technology has influenced their lives more than ever before. It's hard to go anywhere without seeing somebody having a cell phone in their hands. And that has really changed their communication preferences. I was having a conversation with my wife last night. I got a phone call from one of my coworkers, and it was odd to me to get a phone call rather than a text message or a message. We use Slack for our online communications. And just how that struck me how quickly my preferences have changed to not get a phone call, or to actually get a phone call and not have that be the norm. And I think you'll see that in the lives of your church members, how quickly their preferences have changed without them even realizing that. And so in the church and the church office and how we share the gospel, whether it's on Sunday morning or throughout the week, that has really influenced how we connect with our members. And so that's really the reason why we're doing this, is that our mission is so important that it becomes necessary to adapt. We can't stick with our old ways of communication because it's not something trivial like selling a product. I'm a marketer. I sell products, but I know that's not as important as sharing the gospel. Now, thankfully for me, my products assist in sharing the gospel, but what you're doing in the church and working directly with God's people and sharing His grace is so important that it is necessary for us to adapt to these changes. Now, with that brings new opportunities, and it allows us to get into people's lives in a way that we've never been able to before. Before technology, it became a Sunday morning and maybe sometimes during the week that we could reach our members, if there's a midweek service or something along those lines. But now with technology, we have this opportunity to connect with people throughout the week, into the evenings, at the times when they may be struggling with something and need to hear that saving message of God's forgiveness. One of my friends who's a pastor in the Chicago area has talked about how he's used Snapchat to connect with the members of his youth group, and particularly a time when they had nowhere else to turn and they were struggling with something. They sent him a snap and he was able to connect, and just how different that is in ministry. And those are not the things they teach you in seminary, or at least they weren't a few years ago, but how you use the technology of today to connect with people when they really need it most. So again, necessary to adapt, but it's new opportunities that we can take advantage of. So the outline for this course is kind of twofold. First, starting next week, we're going to talk about goals. Everything really revolves around your goals at the church. It provides this opportunity to focus. We'll get into that in a little bit. We're going to move that into personas and talking about the actual members in your congregation and how you interact with them and what kind of journey they're on. Now, journey is kind of a broad term. We'll define that more clearly. It actually becomes very specific that you outline, and it may not be something that you talk about in your congregation as much as you talk about in terms of your communication efforts. We'll get into messaging, because once you know who you're talking to and in what context, then you can start talking about the meat of it. What are you talking about at that stage? From there, we're going to get into channels. And then the channels are the different mediums used for communication, and there are many of them now. We're going to focus on 6 key areas, and I'll show that in a bit. But we're going to provide a framework for this so that you can take these channels and kind of figure out how to leverage each one of them in the right way. So I'm not recommending that churches should be on every single possible channel there is. And the download today will talk about that as well. We'll get into that at the very end, how the download helps you look at these different channels and apply them properly. But putting a good framework in place will allow you to leverage these channels for what they are. They're not all things for all purposes, and each one cannot replace another in the exact same way. So we'll look at them for their own value. But having this framework in place with all your list of channels will then allow you to get into communication campaigns. And campaigns are really where your tactics, where your actual communication happens. So it's that combined strategy for communication events. And by events, I don't mean, let's everybody get together at the same time so our communication is about getting people there. Events could be just a single message that is going to your audience. So we're talking about campaigns, communication events in a broader sense. All right, so what are goals? Well, the goals help us focus our communication. And as we go through this presentation today and through the next 14 weeks, my hope is that we can answer specific questions, and some of them will be listed today. So in this case, the question is, how can we focus our communication? So what are goals? Well, everybody knows what a goal is, but we're going to really dig down into how to develop goals. So we're going to use the SMART methodology. So a goal is a specific desirable result that has not yet been achieved. We use this SMART mentality here at Concordia Publishing House with our annual goals. They're specific, they're measurable, they're achievable. They're not stretch goals to the point that we're uncomfortable with them, but they can be achieved. They're relevant and there's timely, meaning that it's not this ongoing thing. And we'll talk about the distinction between goals and like a mission statement, but a goal is different than a process. A process is something that should be a standing operating procedure within your church. And I've seen or heard church goals that were like, proclaim the gospel in truth and purity. Well, in the broad sense, that's an excellent goal. But in the narrow sense, that's not a great goal because it's something you should always be doing. You cannot ever fully achieve that because the gospel needs to continually be proclaimed. So that's when it becomes a process. It's something that is a standard operating procedure that we proclaim the gospel in truth and purity. So we'll get into what a real goal is that you can apply and regularly review and eventually change and move on to the next goal. And maybe it's the next iteration of that goal. There's a difference, though, between church goals and communication goals. So a church goal flows from the Great Commission. It flows from how do you apply the gospel in this time and place. And so maybe a goal is to introduce a new ministry. Maybe it's to reach a specific audience. Maybe some kind of community has grown up, or sometime a group of people has grown up into your community. Maybe an immigrant community has started to develop, or maybe you're near a college and you're wanting to reach that age group. Maybe it has to relate to something going on with your church, like a new school or a preschool, and that audience is your preschool families. The other thing it could be is changing member habits. So maybe you want more regular attendance in Bible study. That's a great church goal. Your communication goals are separate, and they should flow from your church goals. So as we really dig into church goals, I know that you as communication people don't have the leeway to set your church goals by yourself, and that's where it becomes a collaborative effort. But you could lead that charge. And if you are the pastor, or if you are the head of the church in some capacity, church council president, head of the board of elders, however your structure is set up, you may have that opportunity to really say, we need to narrowly define our goals for this year and moving forward. Now, communication goals, again, they flow from the church goals. They support it. They don't replace it by any means. They could be about establishing new processes. And anything with communication could be, establishing a better email system so that our members know about all the Bible studies. Because the goal is to get them to attend Bible studies, they need to know about it. So it could be establishing processes, or maybe just improving processes. processes. It could be implementing new channels, like maybe we want to have a Facebook page, or if you're really adventurous, we want to begin to utilize Snapchat in our ministry. Those are good goals, and we'll define them in more than just we want to do this, to figure out how and when. It could also be just increasing activities, and maybe you evaluate your current situation and you say, we have the ability to now communicate more frequently or more targeted. So it may not be more frequently, but it's more work on our part, but we want to increase our activities to make our communication better. And that becomes your communication goal, or one of them. So that's next week. I'm really excited to talk about that because that's kind of the basis for moving forward. After goals, then we get into personas. Now, this is very much a marketing term, personas. People is what we're talking about, but in a categorical sense. How do we divide our congregations into communication groups that are based on their communication preferences? But even more than that, as we dig into this, how can we get to know our church members better? How can we get to have a better understanding of how to relate with them, how to communicate with them? What are their intentions? What are their goals for being a member of the body of Christ? Where are they hoping to share the gospel? How do we help them along that line? And I said it's definitely a marketing term. If you look behind me, I'm here in my office here at the publishing house, and I do apologize. You'll probably see some activity. They're painting the rooms next door, so you may get to see the painters live on our broadcast today. But you can see here behind me, there is a number of different cards there. Those are our personas as we interact with Concordia Technology Solutions customers. And we understand that everybody's a little bit different. How a pastor interacts with software is different than how the administrative assistant works with it, which is different than how the treasurer works with the software. And how we communicate with them and what we communicate will vary. And so there's no one-size-fits-all solution. And so that's where personas come into play. So we're going to talk about the personas for the purpose of better understanding our audience. So let me get into the next slide here. There we go. So personas become the recipient of the goal results. We talked about how goals have an end result with it. The personas should be based around that. Who is receiving this? Now, they're fictional representation of our audience. You don't want to pick one person from your church and say they represent that subset. It's not fair to that person, and it's also not accurate for that subset because everybody's different. So while personas become a little bit more general, you create this fictional representation so you can be very specific in how you talk about them. We'll get into that in more detail that week. That's coming up. Now, I should mention that you may, if you research this in the marketing world, I won't even say secular world because it varies even in the secular marketing. You may hear different terms. I know the phrase avatar is thrown around a lot. I don't like that as much because that's so tied to the movie, but it's an accurate description of what we're talking about here. There's some great resources out there on how businesses use this to really personalize messages to better communicate. We're going to get into that. So again, it shapes how you communicate. Your personas may change your tactics, and they certainly have for us here at Concordia Technology Solutions, because our audience is different because they work in the church. They have different goals than just regular software purchasers. And that's what really makes us unique as people join our team and may have worked in the secular environment. Our goals, our customers' goals, are not about revenue. They're about sharing the gospel. That is the revenue. And so it changes how we approach things. It changes our messaging, but it may also change where we go to show up, and what channels we use. So that comes all the way down to the level of tactics, and that changes. So it's important to determine your personas and spend some time on that. Personas should be general enough that every person in your congregation should be able to easily or relatively easily be assigned to a persona. but it also should be specific enough that they accurately describe how you communicate with individual members. And this is where we're going to start getting into some real practical ways of how do you do that within the tools that are currently available to you. Now, I am a marketing manager. One of my product lines, my product groups, is Concordia Technology Solutions. We sell software. We're going to be using our software as an example of this, but please know that I don't want this to be a hard sales pitch. But we have these things in mind as we develop these tools for uses in churches. And so around this time is when we'll jump into Church 360 Members, our church management software that helps you manage your lists of people. And so as we look at personas, we'll talk about how you can set that up using Church 360 Members. Now, like I said, I don't want this to be a sales pitch. The stuff that we're going to talk about is going to be rather product agnostic, meaning if you use another tool, you're still going to be able to follow along. You're still going to be able to use this in your ministry. The lessons learned here go across any of our competitors. So it's not unique to us, but we are going to use that. So I wanted to give that heads up ahead of time. If you get to the third session and all of a sudden we're showing our product and you're like, oh, it's a bait and switch. No, it's just an example of how to apply the principles that we're going to talk about in a realistic situation. So there's my little disclaimer about using our software, but that's going to come up, and that'll really be influencing each of those sessions from 3 all the way almost till the end. We'll look at it in a different way. Not going to be the bulk of the presentation, but I hope it gives you some real tangible ways of saying, oh, here's how I can divide my members into personas. So that you'll see that coming up. All right, let's go to the next slide. From here, we're going to go into persona profiles. And I've got a few examples of how we might set up personas at a church. And this is very basic. We're going to get in far more in depth. So I've got 3 personas. We're going to look at Millennial Melody. And I've got her documented as a single 25-year-old who is actively involved in youth group as a teen and is trying to regain a connection to the church as an adult. Now, that's a fairly specific story, but it's got general implications to it. So, and then down below you'll see I've got like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Those are the different channels, those mediums that will reach out to her. That's different than 40-ish Fred, who's a 42-year-old father whose schedule revolves around his kids and his work, and it's a struggle for him to get involved much outside of worship. And while he may also be on Facebook, it's better to reach out to him through content on YouTube or through LinkedIn, because that's where he spends more of his time than like Instagram. And that's both of them are very different from who we're calling older adult Alice. Alice is 72 years old and is just starting to admit that she needs assistance with her health. She's fearful of losing her independence. And she might be on Facebook or in Pinterest rather than those other channels that we talked about. Now, of course, these are, again, fictional representations of people in our church. And I'm sure as I talked about this, most of you could probably pick someone in your congregation who fits into one of these 3. Now, this is not a complete, comprehensive list of possible personas. And the personas that I put out will not necessarily be the personas that are there in your church. Every church has these different demographics, and obviously you know your church better than me. But what I hope to show is how you can look at your congregation, look at your goals, and figure out who do we want to communicate with in this specific manner. And it can be a lot of fun. It can be a little uncomfortable at first because you start using real-life examples. And it putting them into a fictitious person with a different name, and like the pictures I have are stock photos, and so it feels a little disingenuous. But the purpose of doing that is very genuine, in that we want to communicate based on their terms, not try to push them into our terms. Like, we're not going to tell older adult Alice that in order to find out about the church potluck, you need to go onto Instagram. Like, that's not putting Alice in the front of mind. That's not adapting to her preferences. And ultimately, it's self-serving and making our lives easier. But in the end, she doesn't get to connect with the community as well, because it's a few additional steps for her that make her uncomfortable. So that's just one example of how we use it. We'll talk a lot about how you can apply those personas. That's going to be a lot of fun. From there, we get into a journey map. And I think this question is going to resonate with a lot of people. How do we get the church members moving? Movement is such a key in the church, and churches that become stagnant are very visible, and it's easy to get to that point. Now, the gospel is always moving us to proclaim that message of salvation. That's not the kind of movement we're talking about here. We're talking about how do you get members to be more engaged within your congregation? How do we get them from being, passive attendees to active participants? And that topic we could go really in depth on in terms of getting into talking about, Sunday morning services and what the liturgy says to that. We're not going to take a theological approach to this. We're going to take very much a communications approach. That's the goal of this course, obviously. So we're going to talk about actions, which are specific activities taken by individuals, not the church. And then we'll talk about stages, which is a location on the journey map where the individual resides after taking the action. Now, that's high-level stuff. Let me show you what that actually means in a practical example. So here's a sample journey map. It may be a little light if you have it on your screen. There's a line with dots on it. And each dot represents an action taken by the member, not by the church. So attended a fellowship event, attended worship for the first time, attended a Bible study, started new member class, became a confirmed member, attended worship regularly, attended Bible study regularly. These are our spots or stages, actions along the path that take them from somebody who attended just a fellowship event. We're here in St. Louis. My church, on a monthly basis, our men's group has a barbecue. And that's a great opportunity for the community to connect with our church in a very non-intimidating manner. Well, if somebody has attended that fellowship event and has talked with somebody, that's a first stage. It's very high level. It's not very deep. It's not super integrated with the faith, but it gets them on this path. And then from there, that next step may be coming to worship. And from there, outside of Sunday morning, maybe they're attending a Bible study during the week. We have a very active women's Bible study that occurs regularly. That's a little bit farther along. And so they continue down that path. And so those actions are check marks along the way that give you an idea of where they're at in their faith life, but more so in their relationship with the church, because we can't see into their hearts. Only God can do that. We don't want to make assessments on their faith, but we can make assessments based on their relationship with the church, their connection to the community. And so from here, those become stages. And we name those stages. So in this case, like here, we've got prospect. Most people know what a prospect is. We've got visitors. That's different. They've attended worship before. Then potential member, pre-member, new member, engaged member. And how you communicate and what you communicate to people in each of those stages will vary. So do you need to announce to all of your engaged members when the new member class is starting? Well, no, there may be some benefits to that. I know in my congregation, sometimes members will go through the new member class again for the purpose of kind of refreshing on their knowledge, or maybe it's to help welcome these new members into a community. All of that is good, but that's a very different message. And so maybe as you are sending out notifications saying a new member class is starting, the way you say it to a potential member is different than what you would say to an engaged member. You might say, we are looking for people in the congregation who can sit in on the new member class and help answer questions and engage in discussion with these new members. And for those potential members, you say, we'd love for you to come to this first class to see if this is something you might be interested in attending. They're very different things. This has been a great joy for me in marketing, to be able to go from these, what we call email blasts, where we take one message and we send it to everybody. and instead contextualize it for the person to say, okay, I don't need to tell everybody the same thing because everybody is at a different stage. And so for this group, I'm going to say this. And for this group, I'm going to say this. And for this group, I'm not even going to talk to them about this. It's not worth wasting their attention on this message because it doesn't apply to them where they're at. Now, let me not make this sound too easy. It is a lot of work, but it is good work because it focuses on our audience and makes everything more meaningful to them with who they are and where they're at. So I get a little excited about this, as you can tell. But so journey maps are an important part of the process. We're moving along now to actually getting into the message. So messaging is, that theme is going to answer the question, how can we focus our message? How can we focus our message for that audience? And we're going to talk about message maps. So message maps is the first thing. It shows the connection between our ministry goals and our individual messages that we communicate. And we're going to talk about content mapping. Content mapping provides that personal contact at individual stages of the journey map. And let me show you what I mean by that. So message map first. Message map starts with your mission statement. It starts with the Great Commission. And then it branches off into your goals, your church goals, not necessarily your communication goals yet, because your church goals flow directly from your mission statement. And then lastly, then it gets into your communication goals, which have different messages. Now, I'm not proposing necessarily that you have 4 church goals and 8 communication goals or communication messages, but this gives you this idea. So this branches out more from like a water flow effect. We use that around here at CPH for our goals, and from our corporate goals to our department goals to our individual goals. It's kind of like that, except it goes a little bit more from a communications perspective. And this is widely used within kind of PR areas within business or with other organizations where you help keep the message on topic. And if you've ever seen an interview with a PR person, you'll see they always bring it back to a few key points. They're controlling the message because ultimately it focuses on their goals. Now, in the secular world, those goals are certainly not the same as ours as the church. But within the church, our goals is to always point the message back to Christ. Now that's starting to get into the theological aspect of how do we take the story of our church, of what's going on here, show how it fits into that bigger story of the church, the capital C church. And that's where these messages really become exciting, because if you can tie it back from showing the individuals how they connect to the body of Christ that shows that we're all one, that's awesome. That's where the gospel is shown. And so message maps, while it's taking a secular concept, it applies it wonderfully within the ministry. Now, content mapping is a little different than that. So content mapping takes your journey map that we talked about before, and I just dropped the names down on those different stages just to clear some space, because it takes this journey map and says, what does this do within the context of your personas? And so then your personas will have different messages along the lines. Now you see, I put content up there a lot. Content is a very broad term. You may have been in presentations by one of my coworkers, Andrew Osborne, who is our content specialist. And we talk about that because content is so broad. It may be video, it may be written content, it may be graphic design content. But ultimately, it's connecting the message with the person at the right place. So you're combining all of these different ideas into one. And I mean, we've got a lot of yellow squares up there. It's a lot of work to do this, and it's an ongoing effort. But you prioritize, and it really helps you say, okay, so for Millennial Melody, as she is becoming a new member, what kind of resources do we provide her? What messaging do we give her to really help her move from that new member into an engaged member? And that's going to be different than somebody like Alice, who is older adult Alice, has very different life experiences, grew up in a very different time frame. How do we help her connect from going from a new member to an engaged member? And in some cases, this may just be the conversations you have. In other cases, it may be the Bible studies that you produce and the small groups. It may also be the fellowship activities that you have. It really can change it and take it a step above just communication into holistic efforts. But again, you're going back, it's tied to your goals, it's tied to your people, it's tied to the gospel. What's the best way to apply the gospel in that specific context? All right, let me go back here. I apologize if I'm losing my voice. I've been talking a lot today. So if that goes out, we'll make do some way. The next stage is channels, and this gets into the real hands-on practical aspects. And we got a lot of questions we're going to answer in this. This is just a few. How can our website be better? How can we make our emails more effective? How much time should we spend on social media? How do we get our website to show up in Google? That's really practical, all the way down to when somebody is on their phone and says, okay, Google, what are the churches in my area? How can your church be there? So we'll get into the real nitty-gritty with some of these. So the challenge, or the channels that we're going to focus on, first we're going to get to we'll look at the website. And the website is really the home base. We're going to look at that in just a moment, actually. We'll talk about the website. We'll talk about your blog. Now, in my experiences, most churches don't have a blog. And I use blog because that term is familiar, and it's a lot easier to say than syndicated content. But that's what I mean, is syndicated content that is released on a regular, periodic basis. And so whether that is a written blog or a video blog, a vlog, maybe it's just the way you approach it in social media as your communication center. So we'll go into all of that. And that's also tied into email. Now, email serves multiple purposes because you can do it to a large audience or you can do it one-offs. We'll talk about each of those, but more so in that broad audience of our broad aspect of being a media channel, media meaning content of all forms. We're spend quite a bit of time talking about social and what that means, and it goes in two ways. Social being your organic, your pages, but then also your social ads. I'm going to dig in a little bit deeper to each one. I got to be careful not to go too far right now. Search, and that goes back to how do I show up in Google, and then paid, which ties in with both search and social. So let's talk about each one of these. Your website is your home base of all communication. It is the only channel where your church can control the environment. Now, step back and think about that for a second. And marketers have understood this for a while, but even more so today, it's so critical to understand that in most places, you are not the only message being received. So one of my favorite concepts within marketing is that our currency is not dollars. Our currency is attention. And in the church, that is very true, more so today than ever before. That what you are competing for is you're competing for your members' time, certainly, their treasures, their talents, certainly, all of that. But more so than ever before, you're competing for their attention. And it used to be that when they are sitting in the church on Sunday morning and the pastor is preaching, and you're competing against sleepiness or maybe what's interesting in the bulletin, now you also are competing with that cell phone that's in their pocket that has the entire access to the world there and is distracting them from the message of the gospel. So your church website, just like that, is the only place that you can control, whereas social media, there is ads, there are cat pictures, is a phrase that goes around that, for marketers, our ads are competing against cat pictures and family photos and videos. On your church website, it is just your church website. And so when people get to their focus, as much as it can be, is on your message. So, websites still play a very big role. I always cringe when somebody says, well, we don't need a website, we have a Facebook page. You need a website still because people are not going to be able to connect with you as well or as focused in a social media arena as they will on your website. So we'll get into that quite a bit. One thing that's key is mobile optimization, that your website is great on a cell phone. And that's standard. We're going to talk about how how that idea changes how you develop a website, and or not even develop, how you update, how you maintain. Lastly, most timely content, relevant content that focuses on the goals of the viewers is what your website should be. It is, or must contain, pardon me. We've done a few other training sessions where we've talked about how your website is more than an online bulletin board. And again, I cringe when I hear somebody say, well, we have a website that we put up a couple years ago and it's still going strong. And I say, well, how often do you update it? Well, we don't need to. It's got all the information about our church that is relevant. So we've got our service times, we've got our address. That's an online bulletin board where it has static content that doesn't change, is not relevant, and doesn't focus on the goals of the viewer. So doesn't focus on your audience at all. So websites need to be active. They're almost like living, breathing environments. So not quite to that extent, because it's the people who are updating it. And we're going to get into that and more. There's also a lot related to your audience. And what do you put on your website for the public versus what do you put on there for your members? Because they have very different goals. And you can't serve both of those goals with one message. All right, let's move on to the next one. I could talk about all of these topics for a very lengthy period of time, which is why we are doing 14 weeks on this, so that I can really dig into these. But I want to give a good overview so you know what to expect, and give you that complete picture at the beginning so you see how it ties together. Blogs. So this is a collection of practical, shareable content to achieve ministry goals. And again, content does not necessarily mean written, which blogs often refer to. So post messages should be tailored to specific audience or specific goals. They provide useful support for all other channels. If you pay attention to Concordia Technology Solutions on social media, I'm sure you've seen that our primary goal with social is to share our blog content, because our blog content is what really is the meats and potatoes of ministry, communications, of management, and so we leverage social to share our blog content as opposed to driving people from our blog to social. And that gets into the framework, which we'll be going to in just a few moments. So your blog, your syndicated content must be timely and will be time-consuming. I mentioned before this process is not easy. All of these things do require time, but we prioritize our time based on what's important, and all of this is very important, and I hope to show that too as we go. If I haven't already yet, emphasize that. So blog is very much related to email. And email gets a bad rap a lot of the times because marketers like myself have been able to, use it as a tool for our business needs for a very long time now. So we've gotten very good at sending emails, or at least very good at the sending part. Maybe the emails aren't always very good. But it's still one of the most effective communication methods. And even as we've launched this comprehensive, we got most of our response from our emails. I'm sure the majority of the people who are here today first heard about it from our emails. That's where we launched it. And that's how we've gotten the most signups. So still very effective and very effective in the church. It's often preferred due to its non-immediate nature, preferred by the members. So if I get a text message, I tend to address it right away. It's similar to a phone call. If I get an email, it's in my court how often or how quickly I respond to it. And so that becomes very audience focused because as I'm getting that message, I can choose how and when to react, whereas texts are a little bit more invasive. So that's why it's often preferred by members, especially older members, because they've had more experience with it. Younger members are not in email as much. Like if you talk to a teenager about emails, they probably have some kind of email account so that they can sign up for social media accounts. That's their preferred method, and it'll change. So best one is personalized, again, optimized for mobile viewing, and that goes into just how you write it. And should always encourage next steps. We call those call to actions. You'll see buttons that say sign up here, or as we'll talk later about our free PDF download, it's download now. All right, social media. And just a quick overview. The ones that we're going to talk about in more or less detail is Facebook, the largest available audience. That's where most people are, more so than any other channel. And that focuses on sharing relevant content. And I use relevant in content in the very broad sense, meaning people share what excites them. I share pictures of my kids because that is what's most exciting for me as the father of two young kids. They are hilarious and just such a joy that I want to share that. And other people will share photos of their pets or of their projects or their food because that's exciting to them. So it's relevant to them. And when you talk about learning more about your members and understanding them better, that's a great place to see it is on social. See what really excites them. Now, Instagram is closely related to Facebook. They're owned by this. Facebook owns Instagram, and it has a very different purpose. It's much more about sharing photos, experience, and it's one of the quickest growing audiences out there. And so it's not something that can be ignored, although it's a very different approach than with Facebook. Twitter has also been getting a bad rap similar to email. It's struggling to maintain its purpose. Its focus is on short and timely notices, which in the church has its place. But Twitter has become almost like the replacement for the news rather than the replacement for communicating with friends. You'll see celebrities use Twitter more than anything because it's a great way for them to kind of dictate the message and not rely on news media to determine what's being said. As you can see with our president, he prefers Twitter because he gets to say what he wants to say, even when he makes up a word that goes viral. But he's controlling that message. So Twitter still serves its place, although I think in the church there's a lesser place for that than some of these other channels. Now, LinkedIn, a professional network with a little bit of a social side on it, focusing on connections, focusing on learning too. LinkedIn has now bought out lynda.com, which is one of my favorite online training tools. And so I think there's a place in there for church workers, maybe not as much for the church itself. But I'm going to share my LinkedIn so you can connect with me there. We'll talk about that in greater detail as we get into social. So I think there's a role for it. I like LinkedIn from a very much a learning standpoint, and I'll share why and how churches might be able to use that, or at the very least, church workers. Pinterest, digital scrapbooking with minimal social element, although there is a social element to it. We put it in social because it fits in with everything else. But there the focus is on creativity and inspiration. And I have a Pinterest account where I go and I put in all these really nerdy things that my wife just rolls her eyes at, because it's things like charts and graphs and Excel workbooks and dashboards and things that get me excited as a marketer, as a business person. And it really gets me inspired as I look for creative designs. It's going to be different for every person, but it's a great place for creativity to go and just enjoy the different beautiful things that are out there that people create and just show this intelligent design that the Lord has blessed us as individuals with. So Pinterest, from a church perspective, there are practical applications. We'll talk about those a little bit. It's not going to be the primary goal, but in things like VBS, things like Sunday school where you could show off what the kids are doing, there's some cool things there that we could do. And then Snapchat. Now, I'll warn you, this is the area I'm least familiar with. Even though I am technically a millennial, I'm an old millennial. And this really goes to the young millennials and younger than them. But it's a rising social network, popular among youth. Brands are starting to get into that more and more. They say that marketers will ruin everything. We're starting to do that with Snapchat a little bit, but Snapchat has really tried to maintain its identity. And even when Facebook and Instagram copy some of the features, Snapchat has a specific purpose, and it's much more about connecting one-on-one than blasting messages to the group. So Snapchat has a bad reputation from how it started with photos disappearing, but it's where this younger audience is. And so if that's a key part of your ministry, then it's important for you to be there too. And like I mentioned, my friend Don, who's a pastor in Chicago, has really done a good job of leveraging Snapchat and Instagram as he ministers to the youth. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but like I said, I'm not as well versed on that as some of these other channels. Search still plays an important role. That is, I believe, the fifth of these 6 channels that we're going to talk about. But it keeps the focus on your most important channel, your website. And it's all about getting people to your website who you don't already know who they are. It's the most engaged audience. And I say that because everything is intention driven. So when you are going into a search, you are saying, I need an answer. Google, show me this answer. You are narrowed in on that specific thing for that specific point in time. And while it may be very quick, it's very focused, very engaged time for you to be with your audience. And I say it's essentially free because we're going to talk about paid in a minute. But the work that you do on your website from a search engine optimization standpoint is essentially free other than your time. Now, search engine optimization is frequently changing, and so that, from a time standpoint, it's certainly not free because you have to keep up with it. But we're going to talk about where the church workers should focus their energy and where they need to draw the line. Because you could spend all your time optimizing for search engines, but it really, you lose the value at a certain point, that law of diminishing returns. And so we'll talk about where church workers should draw the line when it comes to church websites. But the focus, going back to the audience, is leading visitors exactly where they need to go. All right. I just realized that something went wrong. Hopefully I'm still broadcasting live on Facebook. I just got a message on the screen that something went wrong. So I'm going to continue on. I've got my team watching, and if something did go wrong, they're going to let me know. All right, so next. I want to make sure that I'm still live. It looks like I'm still going. Let me connect back in there. I do pardon for the delay. All right, I think I'm still live. Good, I'm on paid advertising. So sorry about that. That's the fun part of being on live video, is that you get to see as things go wrong. But I think we're up and running. I still show viewers, so I think we're good. So let's get into paid advertising. So paid advertising targets users based on intent, interest, and identification. Self-managed pay-per-click budgeting, all these fancy terms. But paid advertising is very different today than it used to be when you think about things like the phone book, where you are putting a message out for everybody. In today's world of social media and search engines, you can target people based on so many different things. So like I said here, intent, interest, even identification. And so you can hit a list of people and target just those people based on email address or other things. So it's managed by pay-per-click, which makes it really nice compared to historical marketing. I think it's John Wanamaker, if I remember the name correctly, who said that I know that half of my advertising is effective, but I don't know which half, or something along those lines. It's a great quote that basically says that when it comes down to marketing and advertising, we haven't been able to know what's most effective, even if we know something's working. Well, now with pay-per-click, you only pay for results. So we'll get into that. It's ideal for targeting a new yet targeted audience. If you want to grow your member base, your audience, that you would be able to target people in your neighborhood, in your city. There is a steep learning curve that requires regular monitoring because it's frequently changing. And as I've gotten in and out of Facebook ads, I've got Buffy on our team who works on it more than I do. I frequently have to go to her and say, okay, Buffy, look, at something changed here. What am I missing now that I've been gone a week and haven't looked at it? So the ones we're going to talk about, and we're not going to go in great depth because there's so much that we could do, but we're going to talk about Google AdWords, which is how do you show up in Google? Well, organic, the free stuff is one key way, but paid also is a way to kind of jump to the top quickly if you want. Facebook ads is probably the most powerful targeted ad platform. We're going to spend most of our time in there, and then we're going to talk about Twitter too and how to use that. So I'm kind of down on Twitter. A lot of people are down on Twitter. There are still some practical applications that we'll use for that. All right. Framework is next, and I'm looking at my time. I'm going to try to keep all of these under an hour. I may go a little long. If you have to leave, you have to leave. You can watch the recording later, but I'm getting near the end. But framework is where I get really excited. How do we leverage each channel? Now, the things I love about establishing a framework, and I've got a set framework that I'm going to share with you, it emphasizes your journey map, which does vary from congregation to congregation. But it downplays any one channel. And so if some channels are ineffective for you, your framework gives you the permission to let it go and to not focus all your attention on everything or focus attention on all things. So, but it does give each channel a purpose and a chance to kind of win, to prove its worth for you in your setting. It also gives each message direction. So we divided the framework into 3 areas. So, and I get this from a great speaker, Chris Brogan, pardon me. He talked about this at this conference, and I kind of took it and then shaped it a little bit to apply more to the church than what he had said. But there's 3 stages of this. There's your outposts, which are where your conversations happen. Now, this could be social, this could be search, this could be paid. And conversations not being verbal conversations, but being two-way conversations, even if one way is not actually, if it's automated. So like search. When somebody goes in and searches, what are churches in my area? There's a message that comes back. There's this dialogue that's occurring, even if you are a little bit more of a passive participant of that. Then there's your media empire. And empire is such a big word to this, but this is your collection of messages. And so this is your correspondence, your content. So blogs and emails are part of it. Your sermon database, where you may put all of your sermons online. That goes into your media empire. Now, all of this leads you closer and closer to the home base, which is your website, which is where you get conversions. Now, I'm not talking conversions in the theological sense. That's the work of the Holy Spirit. We're not going to try to do that for him, because he does it quite well on his own. No, we're talking about conversions within your journey map to get people to the next stage. And so that conversion may be attending a barbecue. That doesn't have to be some great a monumental moment in a faith life. It's a conversion of getting the next step on the journey map. But your website is the best way because, again, you control the message. So content framework gets me really excited. I'm going to be talking about this in greater detail at our Lutheran Communicators Digital Conference that we just announced this week. It's going to be online June 13th, and I'm giving a heads up on the presentation. We haven't released the speaker list, but for those of you who are tuning in live, know that I'll be presenting on this specific topic during that event. And we'll also talk about that later down in the comprehensive. We're a number of weeks back now. But all right, finally, we're going to get into campaigns. And that's going to answer the question, how can we be consistent and efficient in our communications? All of this is a lot of work. All of this is a lot, meaning that there's this great potential to kind of go off the rails and do each thing is kind of on its own. How do we be consistent, and how do we save time by being consistent in our communications? So these are templated tactics for consistency's sake. They're familiar movements for the audience, so as you do things in the same way each time, people know what to expect. It allows you to evaluate your campaigns, your collection of tactics, because of specific goals. And it allows you to give a unique message by person, by stage. So taking all of this together, going back to that content mapping, but even more so, bringing the tactics into it. So let me show you what this means. There's our journey map again. And campaigns are efforts of moving people along the journey map. And a campaign will be a different message, and it would be for a different audience, or could be. It may be for all audience if it's a very broad message, or one audience if it's a very specific message. But these are things that you begin to template out and do time and time again. So one of these yellow blocks, these campaigns, would fit into something like this, where you have your framework, your outposts, your media empire, your home base, and then you put your tactics in there with your different channels and show how you'd use it. And so it's going to be a different combination for each campaign. Some may have all of your tactics in place, and some may have only one in each stage. But we're going to start documenting some of these that can be reused time and time again. And especially as you get volunteers in there or new members, you're not thinking from scratch each time. You're saying, okay, here's our campaign template. Now, the message in the audience may change, and so obviously it's a different campaign, but how I go about it is going to be the same way time and time again. Now that wraps us up here. So the last week of the comprehensive, we're going to talk about how do we put it all together and how do we get others on board. And there's no right, easy answer for this. But a few of the ingredients that go into it are documenting our strategy. And I put out on our private Facebook group for this comprehensive who has a documented communication strategy. And one person had to start. So I know this is a great need, and it's something that most congregations don't have in place. So we're going to document our strategy. We're going to train the church staff on it. This does not have to be real detailed training, but just let everybody know what's going on. But for you personally, as the leader of this plan, it's important for you to stick with it. Even when it seems hard, even when it's time-consuming, stick with the process because it'll certainly get easier over time. And it's the right thing to do for the sake of our members, for the sake of the message, for the sake of the gospel, which is that connection between the message and the members. So, but lastly, and I always like to make sure people understand this, you'll adjust as you learn. And this has been a learning process for me to apply it here in my work. It's going to be a learning process for you in your church. And things that work at one church may not work at the next because everybody's context is a bit different. So that is the broad overview, and I covered it all in an hour. As you can tell, I get very excited about this, and there's a lot of stuff here. And so 1 hour today helps you at least see where we're headed, gives you a good idea of how you're going to get started, where we're going to go. But it's probably not enough for you to go and take this and implement a communication plan. So let's talk a little bit more about today about the comprehensive and what we're providing for you. So first off, we on our Concordia Technology in Your Ministry blog, I put our first one up there, Planning Church Online Communication. So this talks about a little bit of my experiences from the path, which have helped lead me to where I'm at here. The Lord put these experiences before me to I know lead me down to this path to help others, and it's exciting and it was fun reminiscing. So if you go to concordiatechnology.org/blog, you can see a short story there, a couple short stories that lead into some key lessons that I learned. Now every week we're going to do a new blog post that's related to the lesson. Most of them are actually going to be much more about that week's topic than today's was. Since today was the broad overview of everything, I narrowed it down a little bit on strategy. At the end of that blog post, you can get a link to our free document. So today our document is Tracking Your Church Communication Footprint, or your church's communication footprint. This is a great practice to go in at the beginning. And you'll see, next time I'll pull up the document, I should have had it live here as well. But it gives you just a bunch of different potential channels where you communicate. Now it's print and digital, but go through this, it'll kind of jog some thoughts. We left plenty of spaces in there for you to add your own channels. But think about every time and every place, every means by which you relay a message to your audience, because it's going to be important to have that footprint of your communication as you begin to document your strategy on where you're going to go from there. So that is available for free. If you signed up for this course, I'll be emailing you a link later on today where you can just go straight to it and get it. But otherwise, you can go to the blog and fill out the form from there. Now, many of you have already taken advantage of this. Our Church Online Communications Comprehensive group on Facebook. It's a closed group. You have to request to join. So I've been approving those requests, and we had a number. I got a little bit behind this morning as I was meeting with a congregation, but I think everybody who had requested to join before 11:15 or so has now been accepted. I'm going to try to post content in there almost on a daily basis, or at least some questions. I'll post this video in there. I'll post the download in there, and it'll be a great opportunity for you to engage with other people as you go. And these are people who may be in very similar situations to what you're in, or they may be in very different, but we can learn from all of those. So next week, where we're headed is setting church communication goals. So that's going to be next Thursday, June 8th, 11:30, same bat time, same bat channel. Come back here to Facebook, our Facebook page at Concordia Technology. I'll be posting this live event shortly, so you can sign up to get reminders. And as I get into this next portion where I review our whole schedule, I will be, over the next couple of days, posting all of these as events into the private Facebook group. So you can get those reminders, you can join the event, and so you can join live. But the where is it going with it? You can join live, but you'll be able to watch those recordings after the fact too. Okay, so next up, I'm going to show the whole schedule and talk a little bit about this. So we have 14 weeks. Today is already done now. Next week we're talking about setting church communication goals. We're going to move in June 15th, determining your church audience. Now, I will tell you, this one will be recorded. My wife and I are about to celebrate our 10th anniversary on the 16th, and so we're going to take a trip. And so I promised her that I would not go on Facebook Live during our vacation. So next week will be recorded. We'll post it around the same time, and so you'll be able to get that content. From there, we've got a series. The next several are going to all be live. Understanding your church audience, creating movement in your church communications, giving your communications focus, communicating in the right context, making the most of each communication channel. From there, we'll talk about the tactics, building a great website for church communications. Now, I'll actually be in Chicago on that day. I'll be presenting that week at the LCMS Worship Institute. They have a lengthier name that I still haven't memorized, but I'll be talking about Lutheran Service Builder there. But that day, July 27th, I'm not presenting. So I'm going to try to do that live. It may be recorded. We'll see. I've got a fun idea that I don't know if we'll be able to make it work out for that day. But regardless, that content will be available for you on July 27th, one way or another. From there, we'll move on to establishing a communication hub for your church. That's going to focus on both blogs and emails. Get into social media, understanding search engine optimization, saving time. That's going to be all those campaign templates. And then the last week, August 31st, is going to be how do you share your excitement about your communication strategy. And I say excitement because it's not rules. It's about making your communications better. So that will wrap us up with that. And if everything goes well with this comprehensive, we're going to plan, or in the process of planning another comprehensive to start up in September. Now, that's going to go a little bit off from the communications, although there are communication aspects in that. So more on that to come if we're able to get that going as well. That one I don't have